Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Todd Couch. I'm an assistant professor of sociology and the current vice president of the coalition. And on behalf of the entire coalition, I'd like to welcome everyone to our third cultural conversation speaker for this year. Today, we will be highlighting Dr. Shayna Wrighton. Dr. Wrighton holds a Bachelor's of Science in Neuroscience from Furman and a PhD in Biomedical Science from the University of South Carolina School of Medicine. Dr. Wrighton joined the faculty at Francis Marion in January 2012. She is currently an associate professor of biology and coordinator for the African and African American Studies program. Dr. Wrighton primarily teaches human physiology and introduction to neuroscience. Her research interests revolve around understanding behavioral and nervous system processes that underlie social interactions, including implicit racial bias. Outside of work, Dr. Wrighton enjoys spending time with family, friends, reading, writing, cooking, and being outdoors. Dr. Wrighton lives in Florence, South Carolina with her husband John and her two sons, Carter and Philip. Please help me welcome Dr. Wrighton to the stage.
Thank you, Todd, for that lovely introduction, and thank you so much to all of you for choosing to be here today, and for those of you who are watching and those who will go back and maybe listen to this a little later. Thank you all so much for being here and indulging me for the next 45 minutes. As Dr. Couch said, my name is Shayna Wrighton. I am an associate professor of biology and coordinator for the African and African American Studies program. And today I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about some experiences that I have had throughout my life. I'm going to talk to you all about something that is very important to me personally, and something that is hopefully important to all of you as well. And if it's not important yet, hopefully it will be by the end of our conversation today. So, before we get started, I have some disclaimers to put out there. Some of these disclaimers are going to be pretty obvious to you all, and some of these are going to be a little bit less obvious. But I want to make sure that we all just start off on the same page. So the first disclaimer that I have is that I am Black. So this is one that is probably pretty obvious to anyone who has ever seen me. And I want you all to know that I am not Black just today, but that I've been Black my entire life. Now, I point these two things out, even though they are obvious, because what I'm talking about today are experiences that I have had as a Black person in America. Despite the title of my talk, I will not talk about my hair today. So, if you came here trying to find tips and tricks to natural hair, that is not this conversation. But I am happy to have that conversation at a different time in a different place with any of you. As I go through this talk today, it will hopefully become evident to you why I titled my talk, Hair Like Mine. My next disclaimer is that I ask a lot of questions. I am and always have been very curious, and my students will confirm, as will my husband and my children, and anybody who's ever talked to me. I ask a lot of questions. And I wanted to put that out there right now because I'm going to ask you all some questions. Some of those questions I'll ask you to think about. Some of those questions I'll ask you to actually answer and tell me what you think. And I hope that you all will feel free to also ask me questions, because the conversation is pretty boring if it's only one-sided. So I have one more disclaimer to put out there, and this one is probably the most important of all the disclaimers. I am not an expert. The topic that I chose to talk on today is not one that I study or research. The topic that I'm talking on today is not one that I have published articles in or that I have spent my academic career examining. The topic that I'll talk to you about today is one, though, that I have had personal experiences in. And so some of what I'll share with you today are from those personal experiences. I will also share with you some data and some information that have been collected by other people. And so I want to put out there again that I am not an expert in this area, but this is something that I feel important is to talk about. And I want to say to anyone out there who might be disappointed to hear about a topic that I'm not an expert on, you should take this time now to blame the coalition. The coalition gave me this huge stage, a microphone, and they told me that I could talk about anything I wanted. That, my friends, is oh, thank you. Do not encourage me. That is dangerous. But I hope that the coalition members will not regret that decision to let me talk to you all today. Because I am a professor, I'm starting off with a pop quiz. So I have 2 very short pop quizzes in this talk that I will present to you all. For this first pop quiz, there are multiple parts, and for most of them, I'll ask you to just kind of think about your answers, and then I might ask you to share some of those answers as well, either with me or with the people around you. You guys ready? All right. So for the first pop quiz, I'm going to show you a list of professions, and I want you to think about someone either who you know in that profession or what you envision someone in that profession to be like. So take a few seconds now and just think about what someone who is a doctor or a judge, a professor, or so on, what those people look like. Does everybody have some pictures in their heads? Okay. Next part of the pop quiz. I want you to think about what the national average salary for each of these professions might be. You have some numbers? Anybody want to throw some out? Anybody? 100,000? Okay, good. Is that kind of where people are thinking about? Okay, you are a smart person. All right, so these are national averages for salaries for each of these professions. This, of course, is not an absolute number for any of these professions. The salary that someone makes is going to depend on a lot of factors. So where they live, for example, how long they've been in their career, what type of doctor, what type of judge, what type of professor, and so on. But these are rough national averages that I was able to find. For each of these professions, you can see that all of these people make $100,000 or more a year on average. I have one last part to the pop quiz. Can you guess what these percentages in red represent? Does anybody have a thought? Number of black folks. So up here in red, I have the percentages of people within each of these professions who identify as black. So 5% of doctors, 10% of judges, 2% of professors, 5% of CEOs, 3.3% of engineers, and 8% of computer and information systems managers identify as black. So let's take a minute and sort of think about that. I listed 6 professions, and I just chose 6 kind of randomly, and we could have put a number of other professions up there that would have shown these same patterns. These are professions that most, if not all of us, can agree are very important, are very useful, are really good professions to be in. And for all of these people are making, on average, $100,000 or more, which is a pretty nice living wage in most places in America. Also for all of these, the people within these professions that affect our lives, doctors who save our lives, judges who decide what happens to our fate, engineers who build and design roads and bridges that we drive on, within those professions, 90% or more of those people do not identify as black. So, we have a list of professions in which people are affecting all of our daily lives, and yet most of the people in those professions do not look like me. Are you all ready for pop quiz 2? I'm bringing them on fast here. Pop quiz 2. Okay. For pop quiz 2, I'd like you to see if you can figure out what these numbers represent. A little hint, these numbers tell a part of my personal story. Does anyone have any guesses? What's that? My ancestry? Oh, that's a good one. Any other guesses? For any of the numbers? Good. That means I get to teach you something. Okay. So throughout my life, I have earned 3 degrees: a high school diploma, a Bachelor of Science degree, and a PhD. It took me 22 and a half years to earn these 3 degrees. Now, 22 and a half years is a long time. That's 6 years of elementary school, starting with kindergarten, 3 years of middle school, 4 years of high school, 4 years of college, and 5.5 very long, very tough years of graduate school. I don't remember every teacher or professor that I had, but I guess I had at least 95 academic professors or teachers over the course of those 22 years. And I have been very fortunate to have had so many wonderful teachers, many of whom impacted my decision to go into education. Yet, not one of those teachers looked like me. So let's think about that for a minute. I'm 37 years old. I spent 22 and a half years of my life in formal education settings, and I was never taught by anyone who looked like me, who had a similar experience as a Black person in America like me, who had hair like me, listened to music like me, and so on. I'd like you all to, for just a minute, close your eyes. Indulge me here. I want you to imagine a world. I want you to imagine a world in which those percentages that I showed you in red during Pop Quiz 1 were all 50% or higher. I want you to imagine a world where little Black girls growing up in Charleston, South Carolina, cannot go 22 and a half years and not be taught by someone who looks like them. Where little Black children across our country are going to imagine doctors, CEOs, judges, entrepreneurs, all of these people who are in charge and making decisions looking like them. When you're ready, open your eyes. Hair Like Mine is the title of this photograph. This photo was taken by Pete Souza, who is the official White House photographer for President Barack Obama. In this photo, we can see little Jacob, who at this time was 5 years old, touching President Obama's hair. Jacob and his family, as they visited the White House, Jacob was asked if there was any question he wanted to ask the president. And Jacob, being 5, asked, "Does your hair feel like mine?" President Obama decided, instead of giving a verbal answer, that he would bend over and let Jacob touch his hair. And what did Jacob discover? Jacob discovered that yes, President Obama's hair does feel like mine. Now, I was not there. They forgot to invite me, and that's okay. And so I don't know what Pete Souza was thinking when he took this photo. I don't know what Jacob was thinking, or his parents, or his brother, or President Obama. But I am going to tell you all what I think when I see this photo. When I see this photo, I think of hope. I think of Jacob and Jacob's brother and little Black boys all over this country realizing that the most powerful person in the country, and perhaps in the world, had hair like theirs. When I see this photo, I have hope. I have hope for all of the little Black boys who not only got told that they could be president of the United States if they wanted to, but who saw that they could be president of the United States if they wanted to. So at this point, we've talked a little bit about some professions, which most, if not all of us, probably think are very good professions to be in, all of which make a very nice livable salary for America, and all of which are dominated by people who do not look like me. We have also all learned that someone in this country can go 22 and a half years through educational systems and not have a black teacher. If you look like me, when you imagined earlier what people in those professions I listed looked like, chances are those people did not look like you, or it was harder for you to imagine people who looked like you, who were physicians and judges and professors and CEOs. Some of you might be saying, so what? Don't worry, I'll tell you so what. Seeing is believing. No matter how much we tell children they can be anything that they want to be, seeing what they can actually be reflected back to them is much, much more impactful and is what is going to make the biggest difference for those children. Now, you might be asking at this point, okay, well, why is that the case? Why does that happen? There are so many factors that play into who we choose to become, the careers we choose to follow, and I'm going to present to you today just a few of those factors. And this is not because the others are not important, but these are just the ones that I chose for today. So the first thing I hope to convince you of, if you don't already know, is that people are more comfortable with those who look like them. I am a scientist, and so I'm going to show you a graph. Stick with me here. So I'm going to show you some data from a study where infants were asked, well, not asked, but infants were given the opportunity to look at faces that were either their own race or of a different race. And so just for anyone who's not a scientist or not familiar with graphs, I want to explain a little bit. Along the bottom, we have what we call our x-axis. This is the horizontal line. And here, we're looking at age. So we're looking at 6-month-olds and 9-month-olds. Along the vertical line, which we call our y-axis, we're looking at mean novelty preference. And all that means is that people are more likely to look at something that they've not seen before, but that is, in some ways, brings familiarity to them. And so here what we see is that at 6 months old and at 9 months old, the black bars show us that these infants spent more time looking at faces of their own race that they had never seen before than at faces of other races that they had never seen before. In that study, these researchers also looked at exactly where these infants were looking. So as many of us probably have seen, or maybe we have studied, certain ethnicities and racial groups tend to have certain types of facial features. And one of those includes our nose. And so these researchers looked at the gaze or fixation time, so how long these infants spent looking at the noses of people of their own race, which you can see up here on your left, or people of another race. And what they found was that the infants spent significantly more time looking at the noses of people of their own race who they had never seen before versus people of another race. Now, these studies have been performed and shown to be the case over and over and over in infants as young as even 3 months old. And this finding that we prefer faces that look like our own, and as an extension of that, we prefer to be around people who look more similar to us, this is not something that's true only for infants. This is something that lasts throughout childhood, adolescence, and often even into adulthood. I'm going to tell you about some studies now where adult men in Oakland, California were asked to go to a free medical clinic. At the clinic, the men were assigned either to black physicians or non-black physicians. All of the men in the study, all of the subjects themselves were black. And so what the researchers at Stanford found is that black men being seen by a black physician sought more preventative services than black men being seen by a non-black physician. So as a black person, to see a black physician as your healthcare provider, you're more likely to take on services or allow services to be performed that may prevent diseases. These men were also 29% more likely to talk to their physicians about other healthcare concerns besides the ones they had come there for. These men sought more screenings, and they were 47 times more likely to be screened for diabetes and 72% more likely to be screened for high cholesterol compared to black men of similar ages being seen by non-black physicians. Now, there could be a number of reasons for these findings, but what we think is that these black men trusted and felt more comfortable with people who looked like themselves. And what we know is that black patients choose physicians of their own race when possible due to personal preference, not accessibility. So as a black person in this country, I am more likely to choose a black physician if I have a choice. We see these data extend to mental health. So in a group of clinical patients who are undergoing psychotherapy, these patients preferred to see clinicians who were of the same race as them or who were of other minority groups. And this was compared to clinicians or psychotherapists who were not of the same race, but who had undergone racial training. Seeing is believing. People are more comfortable with those who look like themselves. This starts off very early in life and extends and continues for many of us as humans throughout our lifetime. Now, this is all good, right? It's good to know that infants prefer faces of their own race. It's good to know that black people typically prefer physicians who look like them, but that extends beyond the infancy stage and extends beyond healthcare. Having a role model who looks like you makes a positive difference as a child. I'm going to show you some more data, again, because I'm a scientist. And the study that I'm going to show you now was not performed in America, but I think the graphs really show the importance of seeing people who look like you in positive positions. And so in this study, we're looking at an ethnically minority group. And what the researchers did is they took these children, they gave them some tasks to perform. And before the task, they either reminded the children that they were of this ethnic minority, which had a negative stereotype associated with it, very similar to what happens here in America for black children, or they told children of their ethnic identity, but they also told those children about heroes or positive role models who were of the same ethnic identity. They then had another group where they told those children about role models who were not of the same ethnic identity. And so what we see here, we have several lines, and I'm going to go through each one. The dotted black line shows us the number of puzzles that students or children in this experiment solved when they were not reminded of their identity. And so if we look up here, we can see the peak of the black line of that curve is around 30 puzzles these children were able to, on average, solve. If we look at the red line, this shows the children who were reminded that they were from this ethnic group that has been told to them is inferior. And what we see is that our line shifts over, and now the students solve less puzzles. The puzzles are the same, the ability of the students are the same, but now the students have simply just been reminded that they come from a group that others see as inferior. In our blue line, we see students who are reminded of role models who were not of their ethnicity. And again, we see that the students don't perform as well as when they are not reminded of their own ethnicity. But in the green line, we can see that students have a peak puzzle solve rate of about 30, very similar to our control, where students aren't reminded of their ethnicity. And the students in the green line, although they were reminded of their inferior ethnicity, as others have told them they were also reminded of role models who are of that same ethnicity that they are. They had some positive people to look up to. This is a bar graph showing pretty much the same thing, but I think it helps drive home the point. In the gray bar, we see students who were not told about their ethnic identity or not reminded of it. And in the green bar, we see the students who were reminded, but who had that role model that they were also reminded of, who were of the same ethnicity. And we can see that these two groups perform about the same. They get about the same number of answers right. So we know that people are more comfortable with those who look like them, generally speaking. We know that having a positive role model who looks like you can help you perform better. We're also going to find out that Black students are likely to do better in school if they are taught by a Black teacher. In this study, I'm going to talk about a group in Tennessee. They followed some students throughout their educational career, and they were actually looking to see how class size impacted various aspects of the education. But other researchers looked to see how other factors such as race also impacted these students' education. And what was found was that Black students who had at least one Black teacher in grades K through 3 were 13% more likely to graduate from high school. Black students who had at least one Black teacher in grades K through 3 were 19% more likely to enroll in college. In a country where high school graduation rates and college enrollment are both lower in Black individuals compared to our white counterparts, these are really important numbers. We see that having a Black teacher is not only important early on, but also in your college experience. In this study, what was examined is the effect of having a teacher's assistant, or TA, teaching your class if that TA looked like you versus if that TA did not. And so what we found is for the Black students, their grades improved when they were assigned TAs of a similar race or ethnicity. Additionally, those students performed better even in additional classes after they left the class taught by that one particular TA who happened to be of the same race as them. And having a TA teach you who looked like you affected which major you decided to major in and made you more likely to take additional classes in that area where you had a TA who looked like you. So as a reminder, people are more comfortable with those who look like them. Having a role model who looks like you can help you to do better. And having Black teachers can make you more successful, not only having Black teachers early in life, but also during your academic career as a college student. Now, you might be thinking that pesky little question again. So what? Don't worry, I'll tell you. So what is that we have work to do. We, as faculty, as staff, as administrators, and as friends of FMU, have work to do. We, as people who educate young minds who will go out and teach in our school districts, we have work to do. Before I tell you about the specific work that we should do at home, I want to share a little information from a study I read. In this study, students at a predominantly black high school, which had not predominantly black teachers, were asked some questions. 70% of the students believed that there were definitely enough African American students. 25% believed there were not enough African American students. And 5% simply didn't care. Similarly, 70% of students believed that there were not enough African American teachers. 24% of these students believed that there were enough African American students, and those 5% still did not care. And so what does this have to do with us? Why am I telling you this about a study that was performed outside of Florence, outside of South Carolina? Because students are aware. I tell you this because I want us all to remember that our students see, they know, and they understand. Over 40% of the residents of Florence County identify as black. On average, 34% of secondary education teachers in Florence County identify as black. So why should we in particular here at FMU care? In 2020, there were 4,148 students enrolled at FMU. Of those students, 2,160 identified as white, 1,463 identified as black. That means that in 2020, 52% of our students identified as white, and about 35% of our students identified as black. At this same time, there were 324 faculty members. 271 of those faculty members identified as white. Only 26 of those faculty members identify as black. That means that over 80% of the faculty members at Francis Marion in the fall of 2020 identified as white, and only 8% of faculty members identified as black. This is at a university where more than 30% of our students identify themselves as black. And so what does this mean? This means, my friends, that we are in the red zone with those professions that I showed you at the beginning of our talk. We have not yet reached even 10% of our faculty members identifying as black. So I am here today to do a little reality check for us. And in that, I'm going to bring you some sad news. Our students can complete 4 years of college and have only been taught by one, or possibly, depending on their major, no black professors. I'm an optimist, so I'm also going to bring you some happy news. We can change things. So the happy news is that we have the ability and the power to change things. And I'm really an optimist, so I'm going to bring you even happier news. Change is already happening. So the even happier news is that discussions are already happening on campus and within administration to address the low level of black faculty members on campus. And that is really good news for all of us. That means that our administrators realize and acknowledge that increasing the diversity on campus of our faculty members is something that is important and worth their efforts. And that is something that we at FMU should all be really happy about. But that doesn't let you all off the hook. So, change is a part of all of our jobs. We all have to play a role in addressing the disparities in faculty member racial identity on campus. And so you might be sitting here wondering, what can I in particular do? I'm not in administration. I don't alone hire the faculty members. What is it that I can do? At this time, I want to remind you, I am not an expert. But I do have ideas. I have ideas and I have suggestions. I have ideas that I have thought of myself, but I also have ideas that I've gotten from colleagues and from many people around campus. So one thing that we can all do is encourage Black applicants in your field of study to apply to open positions at FMU. If you know someone who is finishing up their graduate work or even perhaps their undergraduate work but moving on to graduate level work, encourage those people to check out FMU when it's time for them to start their careers. We all can also encourage our deans and chairs to ensure that we advertise our job openings on websites and in magazines that are dedicated to diversifying faculty. Another thing that each of us can do is to establish relationships. We can establish relationships with graduate programs, especially ones at HBCUs or historically Black colleges and universities, and we can share with them when we have open positions on campus. We can also establish relationships with undergraduate institutions, including HBCUs, of which we have several here in South Carolina. Another thing that we can do is to ensure that once we have Black faculty who join Francis Marion's family, we keep those Black faculty here. And in doing that, we should all work to ensure that our department has a culture that is welcoming and inclusive. We want to make sure that when people come here, they know how much we appreciate them and how much we value their experiences here on campus. I'm very fortunate that I have so many colleagues here on campus who do not look like me, who have not have shared life experiences that I have had, and who do not have hair like mine, but who I get invaluable time with, who I learn so much from. And I hope that they too learn so much from me. And part of that is because I have a department that is welcoming and a department that's inclusive. The last suggestion or idea that I have is to keep the conversation going. Simply by being here today, by watching this talk, you are already starting to do your part. You are already starting to affect change. You are acknowledging that there are hard topics that we need to talk about, and you are showing that you are willing to talk about these hard topics. And for that, I am very grateful. I am very grateful that each of you chose to be here today. I am very grateful that you chose to allow me to tell you about how it is that someone can spend 22 and a half years in an educational setting and never learn or be taught directly by a person who looks like them. I am happy that you are here today because I have hope and belief that you will work with me to make sure that that doesn't happen again. Before I close, I want to leave you with a quote. Just in case you're still kind of wondering a little bit in your head, so what? We tell children all the time they can be anything they want to be. So what if they don't actually see the people in the positions that they want to go in who look like them? I want to share with you a quote from a young woman who, after recently receiving her PhD, had a very hard time finding a career. And her struggles were written about in this article. But the thing that stood out to me most was something that she said regarding never having had a Black teacher until graduate school. That was the first time I thought I could be a professor. It's important to find that connection, to find that mentorship in your field. It's one thing to navigate your field, but it's another thing to learn to navigate it in your own body. Thank you.
Dr. Wrighton, thank you for sharing your insights with us today. We would now like to open up the floor for questions. If you are with us in person, we ask that you please come down front to one of the microphones And if you're watching online, we would like to invite you to comment in the comment section. And we have Dennis watching the live feed for you. So please feel free to come down with any questions that you may have for our speaker today.
I promise I'm nice. Oh, I am! Okay. And I do want to remind you, I am not an expert.
Thank you, Dr. Wrighton, for the great presentation. I'm sorry I was a little late, but the last half of your presentation was just awesome.
Thank you.
So what I want to say is you probably know that I grew up at Francis Marion as a child in Mars Bluff, as a student at Francis Marion University, coming back as a faculty member and also as a chair of the chemistry department. And we've been talking about this for decades, about the lack of black professorship at Francis Marion University. As a matter of fact, I distinctly remember what we call the campus crybaby issue of the newspaper. Some of you all might know. And that was, I helped wrote those demands. As a student, you don't know, but we wrote demands that more African American professors. Guess what? It got worse. It really got worse. So I guess what I'm saying is, talking about is one thing, but an action plan. I would certainly happy to be a part of an action plan to make this a reality, because we've been talking about this for decades. And honestly, from my perspective, as a former chairman of the chemistry department, it has gotten worse. I worked my butt off to try to diversify my department. But if you look in the audience, who from my department is here? So I really don't know. I'm frustrated, really. I've always been frustrated with this issue of hiring African American faculty and diversifying departments, not only in terms of the numbers, but in terms of the culture. So I was just, any comment you can share with me would be great.
Yeah, thank you for that. So you should be frustrated. This is a problem that is certainly not unique to Francis Marion. This is a problem that we find across the country and perhaps even across the world. And I think that as frustrating as this can be, we have to keep trying and we have to keep working, right? I think we also have to, again, remember that diversifying the faculty, and I'm talking today, of course, about racial diversity, but I would love to see a faculty that reflects our student body in all ways, right? But we have to remember that that's not a job for one of us, right? That's a job for all of us. That's a job that we all have to work together, starting at the top with administration, all the way down through deans and chairs, as well as the faculty within the various departments. And hopefully, as we get this conversation going, and maybe continues, maybe it's not getting going, maybe it's continuing, hopefully we will start having those conversations sort of outside of our small groups. I know that I've had this conversation with several of my colleagues in small groups, and that's great, and that's a nice place to start, but I think we do have to make sure that we start having these conversations on larger and broader scales amongst more and more of our colleagues, maybe across the departments, also maybe having discussions that are going on between administration and the faculty. And I know that some of those discussions are happening right now, which I think is very exciting. And so perhaps reaching out to some administrators so that you can find ways that you can be a part of these discussions, because I think one thing that is extremely important is to remember that we have to include in the conversation the people we're talking about, right? So we have to have these discussions about increasing the number of black faculty with black faculty. Now, that's not to say, of course, that it is the job of black faculty only to increase the number of black faculty, but our input is such that we bring a unique perspective to this issue, right? And so that's a conversation I think we have to make sure we don't leave out certain voices of that conversation, but I also think we do need to make sure that we all see the importance of this issue and we all are working together for it. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Snide remarks? No snide remarks, please. I've got another 15 minutes up here, guys. I told you the coalition made a mistake when they gave me this big stage and a microphone.
Hey, Shayna.
Hey, Tom.
I wanted to take a step back a little bit about the racial makeup of people in the graduate program at South Carolina. You know, that's what brings the pool of applicants to become faculty at universities. Anything you can say about other students that look like yourself at the program?
Yeah, it's low. So unfortunately, the number of black PhDs, of course, in this country lags far behind the number of non-black PhDs. And so that is part of the problem. I am very fortunate in that in my PhD program at the University of South Carolina, we actually had about half of our students at the time who were black. And I know that's a really unique situation to be in. So my perspective is a little bit off on that as far as my personal experience. But I've looked at the numbers and they're not very good. But I do think that one thing that we can do is remember that even though we have a low number of black PhDs, we have black PhDs, right? And so I think saying that there aren't many to choose from is a challenge, but it's not something to stop us. I can speak from personal experience that I am here at Francis Marion University today because Ann Steckman, who was chair when I got hired, reached out to me. And so it might be that we have to reach out to people. Yes, the applicant pool of black PhDs is very, very small. And so that means we have to go the extra step, right? We have to reach out. We have to make that personal connection. We have to get out there and make that personal touch. If Ann hadn't emailed me, I wouldn't be here today, right? So the number of applicants is low, and what that means to me is that we have to work harder.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Michelle Norman from the Department of Speech Language Pathology here at FMU. I'm wondering, do you think there should be some type of incentive program that would attract more professors of color? And if so, what might that program look like? Oh, absolutely. I don't have the authority to put in any types of program like that in place. But I think that what we need to do to attract black applicants is what we need to do. And if that means finding some type of incentive, then we need to find that incentive and attract those people here. I don't know what that incentive might be. I know money is always an incentive for everyone, everywhere, for almost everything. But I also think that if we can get people here to interview and to see the campus and to see our students, that we might not need to incentivize the way we think we do. And so I think, to me, one of the biggest challenges as far as recruiting black faculty members is that we have to reach out and get them. We have to reach out and get them here, right? All of us who work at Francis Marion, for good experiences or bad experiences or whatever we have, we are here, and we're here for a reason. I came to this job thinking I'd be here for 3 years. 10 years later, here I am, right? So I stayed for a reason. And so I think if we can show people that there is a lot of good to be offered here, that people will come, right? There are some factors, of course, that are out of our control. I don't control how much people get paid. I can't change Florence if someone doesn't like a small town. But I think because there's so much good at Francis Marion, that if we can bring people here, that will be at least somewhat of an incentive in and of itself, right? Knowing that you can have support, knowing that you can have good colleagues, that helps you to want to be here. So that was a really long way of saying I don't know. But I do, based on my experiences and on experiences of people I've talked to, I think that most of us who work here, we like working here, right? We've stuck around for a reason. And so if we can show people that, people will come. But the thing is, we have to make sure that we are making the effort to get people here so we can show them. And then once we get them here, we have to make sure that we are being inclusive and that we are welcoming and that all ideas are heard, right? All ideas aren't good ideas, but all ideas deserve to be heard.
My name is Linda Solon, and I'm the chairperson of the coalition. Dr. Wrighton, I want to thank you for accepting our invitation to speak. Your presentation was very informative. Some of the numbers that we looked at was kind of painful, but at the same time, I started at the university in the early 70s. So I've seen a lot. Dr. Peterson spoke of his frustration, and we all feel it and we all understand it. But from the staff side, and you talked about hope, I've seen some hope fulfilled, some minorities in positions that I never thought in my lifetime that I would see. So to me, that's saying that Francis Marion has grown. And you also mentioned that it's a place that we all like to work. I have enjoyed my many years here. It hadn't all been peaceful or happy, but the good outweigh the bad. In saying all that, there is hope. I, as an individual, you said you were speaking from your personal experiences, and that's what I'm speaking on. From what I saw when I started and where I am now, I'm very hopeful. I can look my son in the eyes and say, change has taken place. Do we have more change to put in place? Yeah, we all realize that it's a work in progress. But we thank you so much for encouraging everybody that it's not one person's task, we're in this together. And I want to thank the administration for opening the door for the coalition. When we asked to have a conversation, the door is open, and I want to publicly say that it's very much appreciative. It hadn't always been that way, so I'm not speaking on something someone told me, I'm speaking on what I know. So I'm appreciative of the conversation that the university is having about this topic that was discussed today.
Thank you.
Shayna, I appreciate what you've presented with us today, and I think it's something that we have been aware of for a long time and working at, and it's obvious by the data you've presented, and I think everyone at the university knows that it's an ongoing issue that we have been working at and that we continue to work at, and the conversation is an ongoing conversation, and we can only wish for it to get better for the sake of our students and for the sake of everyone that works at Francis Marion and the community.
Yeah, thank you, I agree. And as I said, I am very excited and grateful that these conversations are happening. Again, I know that there are multiple individuals within administration right now who are having these conversations. And that too, Ms. Linda, gives me hope. That makes me feel like this problem is something that is being addressed. And so the work, so we thank you all in administration because that makes our work just a little bit easier, right? So this is a job for all of us, but having the supportive administration makes that job a little bit easier for the rest of us. But we still have to all work, though. Does anyone have any other thoughts or comments?
Again, Shayna, I'd like to thank you also in wonderful presentation. And I'm not sure whether, this is a proper question or not. And because mostly it's for me personally. Because I've been here for a number of years, and I have seen changes. And when you say that we all have to get involved or help make that change, I was just curious of myself personally, as being a staff person, how would I go about trying to, get involved? And my main thing, and one thing I do try to do is like retention. I try to make sure I get a good relationship with the faculty, the African American faculty when they come here. As you know, I talk with you a lot. And so I'm just, if you have any thoughts, and that's just for me, as playing a part.
Yeah, that's a great question. So obviously your role as a staff member is a little bit different in, for example, the recruitment process for faculty members. But I think certainly one thing that you can do as far as helping with recruitment, again, is have these conversations. So have these conversations with faculty members, Black and not Black, as to why it is important that we are all working together to make sure that we have a higher number of Black faculty members on campus. I also think that what you are doing is perfect, right? So making Black faculty members feel welcomed here, letting us know that you and your Cowboys gear are there for us, that is wonderful. That's a part of creating that culture that makes us want to stay, right? And I think that sometimes we do forget the retention part and how important it is that we retain the Black faculty that we do have. And so what you're doing is great, reaching out to young faculty members, reaching out to new Black faculty members, and letting us know that you are here, that you care, that you're glad we're here. And so I think continuing to do that is wonderful. I think you're doing your work, Mr. Jackson. Except for the Super Bowl. Well, listen, no football talk up here. Well, if no one else has any questions or comments or thoughts, I again thank you all for coming. Hopefully I'm not stepping on your toes, Todd. Are you gonna go? Okay. Thank you all again so much for coming. And again, just please keep this conversation going. Thank you.